Hello everybody and welcome to another hobby cheating video, and today we are going to talk about color saturation. I think a lot of times when people think about shadows, they generally, or thinking about highlights and lowlights, they think about sort of three color setups. It became very popular for companies to make these three color paint sets. One with a highlight color, one with a shade color. I don't like those. If you like them, that's cool, and they're a great trick, especially for people who are newer in the hobby, because then it gives you your obvious highlight and low light. My issue with them is that they're often not accurately shadow colors. They often mix in other colors and stuff like that. So today we're going to talk about color saturation and shadows. Specifically, I've got my little Red Riding Hood here that I'm painting, and obviously red has this very bright shock red. Now, that looks really, really glossy on camera, which I hate. It's the nature of this paint that I used. But we'll handle that in a post step. But anyways, with her lower leg wraps here and in the shadows of this hood and down below here on her waist, I want to create some dark red. So to do that, we're going to play with color saturation. Now, what I've got on my palette here is more or less pure red. That's what's right here, okay? And when I say pure red, what I mean is there's no other colors in it. It's fairly in the middle of the red spectrum. It's very bright. There's no tint or shade pushing it toward white or black. So what is color saturation in general? The more saturated a color is, the more pure of that color it is, right? So it's bright red. That's the simplest way to think about it. There are other sort of wet things going on here, but for simplicity's sake, the more of that thing it is, the more red the red, okay, the more saturated it is. It's the easiest way to think about it. Now, when we desaturate a color, we move it slowly toward gray. So a 100% desaturated color is in the black, gray, white spectrum. Okay, it's what it looks like more or less in the absence of any actual hue. Okay, so there are two separate ways to desaturate colors. The first is to add gray. That's the simplest way. That moves it toward a neutral desaturation. If you add white or black, you're desaturating it, but also tinting it or shading it at the same time. The problem with adding white or black or gray is that you also tend to very much dull the color in addition to desaturating it. You're playing with the way it impacts the light. So another way you can desaturate colors, and this works great for shadows and for areas you want to use a color, but you want to de-emphasize it. You don't want to draw the eye, is to use its complementary or contrasting color. So for red, it's green, okay? If you just think of your color wheel, which you can Google or everybody should have in their head, your opposing color is what desaturates your color. You want to use a little less of it. So for example, if you had purple, you can bring in some yellow and it will desaturate it, or vice versa. If you have blue, you can desaturate it with orange. Now, here I've got an already slightly desaturated green. You can tell this is like a forest green. It's a little bit olive. So it already is a bit desaturated from a normal bright green, right? If we compare that to, say, something like this, which is a very bright green, you can see the difference there. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take some of our red and bring it out here onto the palette. And you can see how red that looks. Okay, then I'm just going to grab a little bit of my green, and I'm going to start mixing that in. And what we're going to get is a desaturated green. Okay? So you can see the difference there. Do you see how that got darker? The more green I put into that, I'll make some super desaturated red over here. So you can see then we have this chain going down here. These work great as your shadow colors, because this is a wonderful deep recess color for your red. It is red, it's just been very desaturated, meaning there's not a lot of light picking out the full color. So when we look at the model here, up under her hood down here, I can lay some of that in to create some of those deep shadows of where the light wouldn't be. And what ends up happening is you get a fairly organic shadow to the red because you're using red, you're just desaturating away the light. And you can see how that looks pretty darn natural. Let's mix in a little more of this up. And from here, I could do the rest of it out to just try to capture the rest of the shadow. The other thing, with red, it's especially fun to use desaturated colors because red is fairly transparent, so it's a really easy blend. Now you can see how instantly I have some shadows there, but also notably, notice that the top looks brighter now than it did because it's opposed by that desaturated color. Okay? One of the problems people often have when highlighting red is that you can't really add white, or you turn it pink. And you can't race into orange, because if you race into orange, you turn it orange. Red doesn't really turn orange. It gets a slightly orangish hue when hit by direct light. So a little bit, something like this color is probably fine, right? That's the next step up. This is Warcolors Red 2. My base here was Warcolors Red 3, by the way, in case you're curious. So you can see how I can just use one little minor highlight, like I'm not going far here. Okay, but because I've desaturated the opposing colors, what's in the ridges, just a slight bit of a step into this sort of red-orange hue on my highlights is going to really look bright, right? And just that easy, it also makes it look very strong. Saturated colors look really strong. They stand out. So desaturating colors is really easy. You just need two opposing color paints. Like I said, here I used red and green. You can see how easy it was for me to make some very organic, natural shadows here. It's a great trick. And here's the other thing, my final thing I want to say about desaturating colors. If you've ever been in a position where you want to use a color on a model, but you know that color is too bright, or you've only got one location to place it. I ran up against this recently when I wanted to place like a purple on a model, but it was the only there was only one legitimate place to put that purple. So let's say for example on her, I wanted to make these boots down here some different color. Okay, some I don't know. Let's say bright purple or something. I would never do that, but let's imagine that was the case. If I made these bright purple and that was it, it would stand out like a sore thumb. The only place you could look if it was this fully saturated purple was at her boots. And that's not where I want to draw the eye, right? I want the eye to move up the figure toward the face. The issue is that bright, fully saturated colors draw the eye. However, if I took that purple and desaturated it way down with some yellow, okay, way down, what I would get is a very dull purple. And if I laid that on the boots, it wouldn't draw the eye. So you can use this trick with desaturating colors to still work colors in to draw especially good if you're trying to draw units, disparate units or models together, say across a crew in Malifaux or something, right? But one of the models only has one weird place where you can lay this color. In that event, what you can do is just desaturate out that color some to minimize its strength, and then you can lay that color in. Subconsciously you still create the harmony on the miniature with the rest of the miniatures or with itself, but you won't break up or make this bright, shocking color that stands out and prevents people's eyes from moving across the figure naturally. So there you go. That's color desaturation. It's pretty simple. It's literally just find your color, find its complementary color, mix them slowly together in varying amounts, as you can see down here, and you get a nice desaturated version of that color, which works wonderfully for your shadows. If you really want to cast it into darkness, you can then take a little bit of the desaturated color and bring in your black very lightly, or bring in a dark gray or something like that. And then you can really start building some deep, deep shadows. But for the most part, you can see how that looks pretty much like a shadow, and I didn't use any gray or anything like that. That is simply red and green at work. All right, so there you go. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you like this tutorial on color saturation. If you want to see more hobby cheating in the future, feel free to subscribe. Give it a like. If you have specific videos you want to see, feel free to throw that down in the comments. I'm always happy to take requests, and I in fact love them and love to speak specifically to challenges people are having in their day-to-day hobbying. Give it a share. That's always the nicest thing you can do, and as always, we'll see you next time.